let's have a go at some Hardanger embroidery. So welcome, I hope you're all having a great December, enjoying some of the vlogmases that are going on. I know I am. Today we're going to try something new. We're going to try a form of embroidery that I've not tried before. A little while ago when I was ordering my main colour for my Jeffra cardigan, I needed to up the cost of the order to get to the delivery, free delivery, because I was like a couple of quid off. If I'm that close, I don't like to then pay for the delivery. I like to make sure my order goes over the free delivery threshold. If I'm like miles away, I don't worry about it, I just pay for the delivery. So I picked up this kit. This is a Hardanger embroidery kit. You can see it's in little angels, so they'll be nice and festive and maybe go up on the tree. They'll match the colour scheme of my main tree, so they might end up on there, or they might end up on the little tree. I haven't decided yet. So what is Hardanger embroidery? Well, you can see it's embroidery, it's got these holes in it, so you cut the fabric away and stitch around the hole, as far as I understand it. It's a form of embroidery that I believe comes from Norway. I think there's a region called Hardanger. Could be wrong, geography is not my strongest point, but it's certainly Scandinavian, and I think it's Norway that it comes from. Traditionally it's white on white, and yeah, it has these holes in it. So we're going to have a go. This kit contains the fabric, the thread, the needle, and crucially the instructions. So this isn't going to be a how-to, this is me having a stab at it. It's basically the steeking of embroidery, because you're cutting your fabric. And I've obviously got my stalk embroidery scissors to hand, ready for cutting the fabric. So I'm going to open this up, have a little read of the instructions and work out what the heck I'm doing. And I'll take you along with me for the journey. See if we can get one done in this video, or at least a decent start on it. So I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take. I think the stitches need to be quite small. Okay. I think I understand it. The instructions are sparse, and I mean super sparse. They're multiple languages, so they're keeping the text kind of limited. They are using diagrams, so that's useful. The designs are charted, so you've got diagrams showing how to work the stitches for each of them. So I think I get the idea, but I think I might want to watch a couple of videos to just make sure before I dive in. Because yeah, I can't find the needle. Sure there's meant to be a needle with this one. Maybe it's just fallen out, so I have to find a needle. And there are two bundles of thread, so one seems to be thicker than the other. In terms of the strands, seem to be thicker than the other. So I guess this is for the detail with the thinner one, and then that one would be for the main sort of outlining and round the holes. Stitching. So yeah, the needles will seem to be absent. I'm sure it said needle. I'll double check that in a second. But it's not like I don't have needles. Ooh. Yeah, there should have been a needle in here. That's okay. Just fallen out somewhere. But yeah, so I will find a needle. Watch a couple of videos, make a start. I'll divide the fabric up. There seems to be plenty of fabric. It's an even weave fabric, and there's 3 designs. So I would have thought I can get all 3 out of this with some left over. So yeah, I will have to do some counting. It is even weave, which I've not worked with before, but it does tell you in the instruction sheet that 2 threads, that one square on the pattern represents 2 threads wide on the fabric. But yeah, this is going to take a while. Just see if I can work out which one looks like the simplest design to start with. Not sure any of them are totally simple, but yeah. There's a good variety of stitches in this. We've got the main sort of outliney and corner stitches. Then there's like a woven one. And there's one with little like knots on the edge. And then there's two different ones to go over some of the holes. And then you've got your general back stitch happening on, and a cross stitch as well. Cross stitch isn't used very much. So yeah. And do a little bit more investigating and find a needle. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I've done a little bit of reading around and watching a few bits and bobs. Found a couple of websites that look like they're going to be useful, so I'll pop those down below. And the Sarah Humphrey video channel, the embroidery channel, is quite useful. She's got a video from a few years ago going into Hardanger. I also found the needle. It had indeed fallen out of the packet, so we have the needle. I've taken a closer look at the fabric. Technically, I think an even weave is 1 warp over 1 weft. This is 2 over 2. So it's technically a Hardanger fabric, so it's like somewhere between Ada and linen. So it's a bit stiffer than your average linen, but not as stiff as Ada. It's a 22 count, so 22 holes per inch. So I've measured it based on the size that they say it's going to come out. And yeah, there's enough for 4 here, based on their measurements and counting the holes versus the squares in the pattern. Now, all of the instructions for Hardanger talk about going over threads and thread counts until they start talking about this type of fabric, and then they seem to be counting the 2 threads that are warp and 2 threads that are weft as 1. So it works a little bit more like an Ada would in terms of counting where you're going. So that's familiar territory for me. So I'm going to cut the first section off and work on just that, because I've not got loads of extra fabric to deal with. Just that cross stitch, you start in the middle, or you count from the middle of the pattern, so that's useful. And I'm going to do this version first. So although it's got a bit more surface embroidery, which I know you can't really see in the photo, it's got some surface embroidery around here that the others haven't got, but it's got fewer Hardanger specific stitches in it. These two have both got picots, and in the pattern for this one, it's got a star stitch over here. They've done a dove's eye in the picture, but the pattern has a star stitch and the dove's eye on this one and just in the centre there. So yes, we're going to start with this one. We're going to see how far we get. We need to start with cluster blocks. Now I've picked this up from pootling around the internet, not from the instructions. They just tell you how to do stitches, they don't give you the names for it. So I'm going to start with the cluster blocks, which are the bits around the bit that you cut out. And there's also like a buttonhole loop edge stitch type thing that you do around the outside as well. Just got back stitched and cross stitched eyes and mouth, and some back stitch to do the decorative stitching around here. And then this one in the middle is the dove's eye stitch. So yeah, we're going to start with the skirt, see how far we get today. We might get as far as doing the cluster blocks for the wings, we shall see. But yeah, if I can just get at least the skirt bit done, that's a good start. So yes, I'm not expecting to get all 3 done today. I'm not even expecting to get 1 finished today. But yeah, so let's get on with it. Okay, so we're making progress. I had to stop last night because it was getting late and I was making mistakes. Well, I say it was getting dark, and because it's white on white, it's quite tricky to see. So I had to stop because I was making mistakes. I mean, I've made mistakes right from the get-go. There's been a lot of pulling back on this, but I have got all of the cluster blocks in, which are worked in satin stitch. I'm now going around putting in the outside edge in buttonhole stitch, which is effectively blanket stitch. That means that when I finish, I can trim off all the excess fabric around the outside. It is taking, as usual, longer than anticipated to get this done. So we'll see if I get it finished today. I think it's probably not going to be today. But what I will do is, now that I've got this wing fully outlined and fully cluster blocked, is I'm going to cut out the holes in this wing and put in the wrapped bars that reinforce what you have left. So I've got a couple of ends to trim off on the back, long ends dangling down there. So yes, we'll do that. We'll put the holes in this wing, do the woven bars there, which will be the same process as I'll do down here, but I'm going to wait until I've done all the surface embroidery around it. And it'll be the same process that I do on here when I've got the buttonholes there. And there's a little bit of surface embroidery to do on the face as well. So there's quite a few little steps to do, but it is coming along and you can sort of get the idea of what Hardanger is. It's not complicated stitches, but being white on white, which is the traditional way of doing it, and it's how the kit came, on size 22 weave fabric for a first go is testing my ability to count to 4 and 5. So yeah, I've been pulling back because I've miscounted, or because I've got the ones coming up on the diagonal, I had them on the wrong angle. They're meant to be straight and I had them diagonal, so they got pulled back and put back in, or I start going down and turning a corner too early, so I have to pull back and put it in. But because you're working through holes, it's not too much of an issue. So I am enjoying it. It is quite restful, not too taxing in terms of what the techniques actually are so far. So yeah, right, so I'll cut some holes. I'm going to take my time on that and make sure I get the right holes. I'm not going to do it on camera. That might be later on when I've done a bit more Hardanger and I've got a bit more confidence with it, but yeah, a little nervy about cutting holes in the fabric. I've got to make sure I get them in the right place. That's the key thing. Okay, so I'll come back once I've cut the holes out and then we'll switch to the thinner thread. So it's using count 5 and count 8 thread. That's what came in the kit. So I'm using the count 5 at the moment, and the count 8 will be done used for the woven bars and the surface embroidery on the skirt, and count 5 is used for everything else. The count 8 is used for everything else. Okay, 8 is the small thinner one. The thicker thread is used for the cluster blocks and the buttonholes and the face, and the thinner thread is used for everything else. Okay, so I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I've taken out the warp threads. So now we're going to work on the weft. What I'm doing is following the way that Sarah Humphrey does it. So cutting the thread in the middle and then pulling it through to the back, so that when I snip it off at the back, any sort of scraggly bits the back. And making sure that I can always see the tips of my scissors so that I'm not accidentally cutting through something that I shouldn't be. So we have our first couple of holes. So I'll do the rest and then we'll work on the woven bands. Okay, so there's all my holes. So the threads that are left in between the cluster blocks, they're not as stable anymore, which is why I'm doing it now rather than after when I cut off the excess fabric. So to reinforce them, you do a needle weaving stitch. I believe woven bars is the term in Hardanger, but I mean, I might be wrong. So you weave over and under 2 threads, 2 threads, 2 threads, 2 threads. So I'm going to get that done with the thinner thread. I'll show you what it looks like when we're there. Okay, so there's the holes with the woven bars put in. So whilst I've got the thinner thread on the needle, I might go and do some of the surface embroidery around here before I switch back to the thicker thread to do the rest of the buttonhole stitches, or I might just unthread the needle and do the buttonholes and then come back to it. We'll see. So yeah, so that's your core Hardanger thing, cluster blocks and woven bars. You can do fancy stitches over the holes and that sort of stuff, and some of the patterns will have that for this kit. I mean, the central hole of this bit will have a fancy stitch over it, but I don't think we're going to get to that today, in all honesty. So that's my basic first go at Hardanger. Partially completed project. Next time you see it will probably be betwixtmas, because it'll be done by then. Possibly with some friends, but I wouldn't hold my breath. So we have our first attempt at Hardanger work in progress there. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I'd love to see you in my next video, but until then there's this one here that may be of interest to you. And I will see you soon. So until next time, happy crafting and bye-bye for now.